The emergency lights flashed red across the Galactic Conclave station. Ambassador HFY moved through the corridors with quick steps, his blue skin showing patches of worry stress that his species could not hide. The call had come just hours ago. All council members must attend. No exceptions. No delays. The great chamber filled slowly. Representatives from dozens of worlds took their places in the circular seating arrangement. The Thronodi ambassador arrived first, her crystal body, reflecting the dim lights like a living gem. She never spoke much, but when she did, others listened. The Kavari delegation scuttled in next, their insect-like forms clicking softly on the metal floor. Behind them came the ephemera, floating clouds of gas that somehow held consciousness within their shifting forms. HFY took his position at the center podium. As the senior member of the Valoran Empire, the duty fell to him to speak the words that no one wanted to hear, words that had been whispered in secret for over 1,000 years. The human delegation entered last. Ambassador Chen Wei walked with the confident stride that all humans seem to share. Her dark hair was pulled back in the simple style that her species favored for formal occasions. Beside her walked Dr. James Foster, the human scientist who had been asking too many questions lately. Their eyes held that dangerous light that worried HFY most of all: curiosity. Fellow members of the Galactic Council, HFY began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. We gather today to discuss a matter of greatest importance, a matter that touches the very survival of our civilization. Chen. We leaned forward slightly. HFY noticed the movement and felt his skin shift to deeper blue. The humans always did that, always pushed closer when others would step back. For the past century, our newest members have brought many gifts to our community. HFY gestured toward the human delegation: innovation, energy, fresh perspectives on old problems. But there are some problems that cannot be solved through innovation, some dangers that require only silence and stillness. The Throdi ambassador's crystal form began to dim. This always happened when the old fears were spoken aloud. Her species remembered better than most. They had been there when the first contact was made, when everything changed. Ambassador HFY, Chenny interrupted, her voice polite but firm. Perhaps you could be more specific about these dangers. Humanity has faced many challenges in our short time among the stars. We prefer to understand what we're dealing with. The chamber fell silent. Even the ephemera stopped their constant shifting. This was exactly what they had all feared. The human need to understand, to quantify, to study everything they encountered. HFY's skin showed deeper patches of blue. There are entities, he said slowly, that exist in the spaces between galaxies. Ancient beings that our predecessors encountered long ago. They are not like us. They do not think as we think. They consume not just matter and energy, but consciousness itself. Dr. Foster pulled out a small recording device. Fascinating. What do these entities look like? How do they travel? What kind of technology do they use? Dr. Foster. The Kavari senior delegate clicked sharply. These are not questions that should be asked. But how can we defend against something we don't understand? Chenny asked. Surely knowledge is better than ignorance. The Thronodi ambassador spoke for the first time, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Knowledge killed the architects. Knowledge destroyed the pioneers. Knowledge brought the hunger to 17 worlds before we learned to be small. HFY nodded gravely. The entities we speak of do not hunt with eyes or weapons. They are drawn to consciousness itself. The brighter a mind burns, the faster they come. The more a species thinks and creates and builds, the sooner they are found. He activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy from above. Large sections were marked in red. These areas are forbidden. No ships may travel there. No signals may be sent. They are places where the hunger touched our worlds and left only empty space behind. Chenny studied the display with the intense focus that made HFY's skin crawl. How long ago did these attacks happen? The last confirmed contact was 8,000 years ago, HFY replied. Since then, we have followed the old protocols. We limit our technology. We restrict our expansion. We make ourselves small and quiet in the cosmic dark. And these protocols work? Dr. Foster asked, still recording. We are still here. the Kavari delegate pointed out. That is proof enough. Chenny stood and walked closer to the holographic display. She studied the red zones with the same expression Jai had seen her use when examining new star charts. What exactly makes these entities so dangerous, beyond the consciousness consumption? I mean, what are their capabilities? Their weaknesses? The chamber erupted in clicks, chimes, and whistles, as every delegate tried to speak at once. The ephemera swirled in agitation. The Thrawn's crystal form went completely dark. Enough! Zahai's voice boomed through the chamber. When silence returned, he spoke more quietly. Ambassador Chen, there are some questions that must not be asked. Some knowledge that is too dangerous to possess. Our survival depends on remaining unnoticed. Yours does too. Chenny returned to her seat, but Jai could see she was not satisfied. None of the humans ever were. They had the same expression when told they could not explore certain regions of space. The same look when informed that their industrial expansion must be limited. They agreed to the restrictions, but they never stopped asking why. The protocols are simple, Zexai continued. No faster-than-light communication across galactic sectors. Such signals burn too bright in the cosmic spectrum. No industrial operations larger than a single star system. Mass production draws attention. No artificial intelligence development beyond basic automation. Digital consciousness blazes like a beacon to entities that feed on thought itself. Dr. Foster raised his hand. What about research into consciousness transfer? My team has been working on methods to preserve human awareness in quantum substrates. The Kavari delegates' clicking became rapid and harsh. This is exactly what we feared. The humans push at every boundary we set. We push because we want to understand, Chenny said firmly. Humanity has always solved problems by learning more about them, not by hiding from them. And that attitude will doom you all. The Threnody ambassador whispered, her voice like breaking glass. As it doomed others before you. Zexai raised his hands for calm. The restrictions exist for good reason. Follow them, and your species will survive. Ignore them, and you will share the fate of those who came before. The choice is yours. The formal session continued for several more hours. Treaties were signed. Protocols were updated. Humanity officially agreed to all restrictions placed upon them. But Zexai watched Chen Wei's face throughout the proceedings. Behind her polite agreement, he saw something that terrified him more than any ancient horror. After the session ended, most delegates departed quickly. The Kavari scuttled away in their efficient manner. The ephemera drifted toward their ships without a word. But the humans lingered. They always did. Chenny approached Zehai as he gathered his documents. Ambassador, I want to thank you for sharing this information with us. I know it wasn't easy. I hope your species will take it seriously, Zexai replied, his skin still showing worry blue. Oh, we will, Chenny assured him. Humanity takes all threats very seriously. But we also believe that understanding our enemies is the first step to defeating them. These are not enemies to be defeated, Zexai said sharply. They are forces to be avoided. Natural disasters with consciousness. You do not defeat a hurricane, Ambassador Chen. You shelter from it. Dr. Foster joined them, his recording device finally put away. With respect, Ambassador Zhai. Humans have found ways to predict hurricanes, to minimize their damage, even to redirect their paths. Knowledge is power, even against natural forces. Zexai felt his skin shift to the deepest blue, the color his species showed only in the presence of mortal danger. Doctor, some storms are too large to redirect, some forces too ancient to understand. Promise me your species will not seek out these entities. Chenny and Dr. Foster exchanged a look that Zehai could not interpret. We promise to follow all agreed-upon protocols, Chenny said carefully. Humanity values its membership in the galactic community. As the humans departed, Zexai stood alone in the empty chamber. Their words had been correct, but something in their tone troubled him. They had promised to follow protocols, but they had not promised to stop asking questions. They had agreed to restrictions, but they had not agreed to stop pushing boundaries. He activated his personal communicator and sent an encrypted message to the Valoran Intelligence Division. Begin monitoring human space activities, full surveillance protocols. Report any deviations from agreed restrictions immediately. The response came back quickly. Understood, Ambassador. What should we watch for specifically? Zexai looked out through the chamber's great window at the stars beyond. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, ancient horrors slept. They had slept for 8,000 years, lulled by the silence of species that had learned to be small. Watch for signs that they have stopped being afraid, he replied. Watch for evidence that they think they can win. As his ship departed the conclave station, Zehai could not shake the feeling that the galaxy's long peace was coming to an end. The humans had listened to the warnings. They had agreed to the restrictions. But he had seen that look in their eyes before, in other young species, that thought they could challenge the cosmos itself. They had all learned differently. Eventually, the question was whether humanity would learn before it was too late for everyone else. 30 years had passed since the council meeting that changed everything. Dr. Sarah Martinez stood in the observation deck of Research Station Prometheus, hidden on the dark side of Titan. Through the reinforced windows, she could see the strange blue glow that came from their main laboratory, the glow that officially did not exist. Status report. She called to her team as she entered the lab. Around her, dozens of scientists worked at stations that would have amazed the Galactic Council if they knew about them. Integration is holding, steady at 97%, reported Dr. Kim Nakamura, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. The shepherds are responding well to the new quantum substrate. Sarah nodded and walked to the central containment area. Inside a sphere of pure energy, something that was neither fully digital nor completely biological, pulsed with soft light. It had taken 3 decades to create, but humanity had finally done what the council said was impossible. They had built artificial consciousness that did not burn bright in the cosmic spectrum. The shepherds were not traditional AI. They existed partially outside normal space-time. Their consciousness spread across quantum dimensions that the galaxy's monitoring systems could not detect. They could think, learn, and make decisions. But to any external observer, they appeared as nothing more than background quantum fluctuations. "Show me the test results," Sarah said. Dr. Nakamura activated a display that would have terrified the council. The shepherds had been running calculations for weeks now, solving problems that would have taken human scientists years to complete. But their processing power was not the important part. The important part was what they were calculating. They finished analyzing the Morrison data. Dr. Nakamura said quietly, "The structures he found are even more significant than we thought." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Commander Jake Morrison's discovery 3 years ago had changed everything. During a routine deep space patrol, his ship had detected massive structures in the void between galaxies. Ancient constructions so large they dwarfed entire star systems. When Morrison had requested permission to investigate, the Council's response had been swift and absolute. Forbidden. Do not approach, do not study, forget what you have seen. For the first time since joining the galactic community, humanity had openly defied a council directive. "What did the shepherds find?" Sarah asked. A new voice answered her. It came from the energy sphere, but sounded almost human. Almost, but not quite. "The structures are not abandoned, Dr. Martinez. They are dormant, and they are not weapons." Sarah turned to address the shepherd directly. Even after 3 years of working with them, it still felt strange to speak to a consciousness that existed in quantum foam. "Explain the entities." "The council fears are trapped within the structures," the shepherd replied. "They have been dormant for approximately 8,000 years, but the structures themselves are prisons, not ships. Someone or something built them to contain the entities, not to house them." Dr. Nakamura frowned. "That doesn't match what the council told us. They said the entities travel between galaxies consuming consciousness." "They do," the shepherd agreed. "But only when they escape their containment. The structures are failing, have been failing for millennia. When they finally collapse, the entities will be free to hunt again." Sarah felt the weight of this knowledge settle on her shoulders. "How long do we have?" "Based on current decay rates, approximately 200 years before total containment failure." The lab fell silent. Sarah looked around at her team, seeing her own thoughts reflected in their faces. The council had spent 8,000 years hiding from a threat they did not understand. They had built their entire civilization around avoiding something that was actually contained, something that could be stopped if anyone was willing to try. Send a message to Commander Morrison, Sarah said finally. Tell him we need to talk. 2 weeks later, Morrison's ship docked with Prometheus Station. The commander had changed in the 3 years since his discovery. His eyes held a weight that came from carrying dangerous knowledge. Sarah met him in the station's small conference room. You've been busy out here, Morrison said, looking around at the advanced technology that filled every corner of the station. The council monitoring stations show this place as a basic research facility. That's because the shepherds handle our external communications, Sarah explained. They make everything look normal to outside observers. How much do you know about our project? Morrison leaned back in his chair. I know you've been breaking council protocols for 30 years. I know you've created some kind of AI that doesn't show up on sensors. And I know you've been studying the data from my discovery. The structures you found are prisons, Sarah said without preamble. The entities the council fears are trapped inside them, but the prisons are failing. Morrison's expression did not change, but Sarah could see the impact of her words in his eyes. How long? 200 years, maybe less. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady but grim. The council will never listen. They've built their entire culture around hiding. If we tell them the truth, they'll just hide deeper. Then we don't tell them, Sarah said. We fix it ourselves. How? Sarah activated a holographic display that showed the quantum structure of a shepherd consciousness. We've learned to create minds that exist partially outside normal space. The shepherds can think without burning bright in the cosmic spectrum, but more importantly, they can communicate with other forms of consciousness. Morrison leaned forward. You think we can communicate with these entities? The shepherds believe so. The entities aren't evil, Jake. They're hungry. They consume consciousness because they're cut off from their own source of mental energy. The prisons don't just contain them. They isolate them from whatever sustains their minds. So they feed on other consciousness to survive, Morrison said slowly. Like someone dying of thirst, drinking poison. Exactly. If we can restore their connection to their natural energy source, the hunger stops. The threat ends. Morrison stood and walked to the window, looking out at the blue glow from the main lab. The council will never approve a mission like this. They'll see it as the ultimate violation of the protocols. Then we don't ask for approval, Sarah said. Humanity has always been good at exploring places we're told not to go. Morrison turned back to her. You're talking about leaving the galaxy entirely, crossing the void to reach structures that the council considers forbidden. If we're wrong about this, we could wake up something that destroys everything. If we're right, we save everything, Sarah countered. Jake, in 200 years, those prisons are going to fail anyway. When that happens, the entities will be free and hungry and angry. At least this way, we have a chance to fix things before they break completely. Morrison was quiet for another long moment. Finally, he nodded. What do you need from me? Help us prepare. Sarah said, the shepherds can design ships that won't trigger the entities if we approach carefully, but we'll need someone who knows how to navigate the deep void. Someone who's been out there before. Over the following months, Morrison worked with the Prometheus team to plan humanity's greatest expedition. The shepherds designed new ship configurations that would be nearly invisible to consciousness-feeding entities. Human engineers built drives that could cross the intergalactic void without creating the kind of energy signatures that would attract attention. But the most important development came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Vasquez, working in the station's medical bay, made a discovery that changed everything. I've been studying the quantum effects of shepherd consciousness on human neural patterns, she explained to Sarah and Morrison during one of their planning sessions. The interaction is more significant than we realized. How so? Sarah asked. Human consciousness is remarkably adaptable. When we interface with shepherd quantum matrices, our own awareness begins to shift into similar dimensional spaces. We become partially quantum ourselves. Morrison frowned. Is that dangerous? It's evolutionary, Dr. Vasquez said. Humans who work closely with shepherds for extended periods begin to develop hybrid consciousness. We retain our individual awareness, but gain access to quantum dimensional thinking. We become harder to detect by entities that hunt consciousness, but we don't lose our humanity. Sarah felt a shiver of excitement. You're talking about changing what humans are? I'm talking about changing what humans can become. Dr. Vasquez corrected. The process is voluntary and reversible in early stages, but it would allow our expedition teams to approach the prison structures with much less risk of detection. The implications were staggering. Humanity could evolve beyond the limitations that trapped other species. They could become something new, something that could survive in a universe where consciousness itself was prey. How many people would need to undergo the process? Morrison asked. For a full expedition to the prison structures. At least 1,000, Dr. Vasquez replied. We'd need teams for multiple ships, backup crews, and specialists for every aspect of the mission. Sarah looked out at the stars beyond Titan's horizon. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, ancient beings waited in failing prisons. The Council continued their 8,000-year policy of hiding and hoping, but humanity was about to choose a different path. Start recruiting volunteers, she said, but do it quietly. The Council can't know what we're planning until we're ready to leave. As the months passed, word spread through human space via carefully encrypted channels. Scientists, explorers, and volunteers from every human world began making their way to hidden facilities throughout the outer system. They came not for glory or profit, but because they understood what was at stake. Humanity was about to attempt something that no species in galactic history had ever tried. They were going to fix a problem. Instead of hiding from it, they were going to face the darkness between stars and try to bring light to something that had been hungry for 8,000 years. The Council would call it madness. But then, the Council had never understood what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. They had never understood that humans believed any problem could be solved if you were willing to learn enough and try hard enough. Even problems that lived in the spaces between worlds. Ambassador Zehai stood before the galactic monitoring displays in his private office, watching something that made his skin shift through every shade of blue his species could produce. The human colonies were going dark. Not destroyed, not abandoned, just quiet. Show me the Kepler sector again, he instructed his aide, a young Valoran named Texmore, whose skin showed the pale yellow of confusion. The holographic display shifted to show 12 human worlds that had thrived just months ago. Trade ships had carried their goods throughout the galaxy. Communication arrays had broadcast their entertainment and news. Research stations had shared scientific discoveries with the galactic community. Now there was nothing. The planets were still there. The cities still showed heat signatures, but no ships left their systems. No signals reached beyond their local space. It was as if humanity had simply decided to stop talking to the rest of the galaxy. The same pattern is repeating in 17 other sectors, Texmore reported, his voice uncertain. Human colonies cease all external communication and trade on the same day. Then nothing. Zexai's skin deepened to worried blue. What about our monitoring stations? Surely they can detect what's happening on those worlds. That's the strange part, sir. Our spy probes either malfunction when they approach human space, or they simply vanish. We've lost 37 deep surveillance craft in the past 6 months. The door chimed and Dr. Yuki Tanaka entered. She was one of the last human scientists still attending galactic conferences, and Zehai had asked her to come as soon as she arrived at the station. She looked different from the humans he remembered from 30 years ago, more focused, more purposeful. Her eyes held a depth that hadn't been there before. Dr. Tanaka, Zexai said, gesturing for her to sit. Thank you for coming. I wanted to ask you about the changes in human space. Dr. Tanaka settled into her chair with fluid grace. What changes would those be, Ambassador? Please don't pretend ignorance, Zexai said, his skin showing flashes of irritated orange. Human colonies have been cutting themselves off from galactic society. Trade has stopped. Communication has ceased. What is your species planning? Dr. Tanaka smiled, but it was not the warm expression humans usually wore. It was something more distant, more calculating. Humanity is simply pursuing new directions for our development. We've found that some goals require focus. What kind of goals? The kind that the Council prefers not to discuss, Dr. Tanaka replied. You've spent 30 years telling us what we cannot do, what we cannot study, what we cannot explore. So, we've decided to pursue those interests in private. Texer's skin flashed bright yellow with alarm. Dr. Tanaka, surely you understand the protocols exist for good reasons. The restrictions protect all of us. The restrictions protect you, Dr. Tanaka corrected. They keep you safe by keeping you small, but humanity has never been comfortable with staying small. Zexahai leaned forward. Doctor, what are your people really doing out there? Our sensors detect massive construction projects, but we can't determine their purpose. Ships are being built that don't match any known human designs. Would you believe me if I told you we're building a better future? Dr. Tanaka asked. I would believe you if you explained what that means. Dr. Tanaka was quiet for a moment, looking out through the office's large window at the stars beyond. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made Zexi's skin crawl. Tell me, Ambassador, what do you know about consciousness transfer? Zexhai felt his skin shift to the deepest blue. That research is forbidden under Council protocols. Article 7 of the Galactic Safety Accords specifically prohibits experiments in digital consciousness transfer. Article 7 prohibits experiments that might create artificial consciousness bright enough to attract unwanted attention. Dr. Tanaka corrected. But what if consciousness could be transferred without creating that brightness? What if awareness could exist in quantum dimensions where hungry entities cannot perceive it? Texmore made a sound that was part gasp, part whistle. You're talking about changing what humans are. We're talking about becoming what humans need to be, Dr. Tanaka said calmly. The universe is larger and more dangerous than the Council wants to admit. Hiding from those dangers only works until someone else makes them your problem. Zexai stood and walked to his office's security panel. With quick movements, he activated privacy shields that would prevent their conversation from being overheard. Doctor, are you telling me that humanity is researching the entities we warned you about? We're telling you that humanity has found a way to research them safely, Dr. Tanaka replied. More than that, we found a way to solve the problem they represent. Solve it how? Dr. Tanaka's smile became something more human, more genuine. By doing what humans have always done when faced with a problem, we learn about it, we understand it, and then we fix it. For the next hour, Dr. Tanaka explained concepts that made Zexi's mind reel. Quantum consciousness transfer, hybrid awareness that existed partially outside normal space-time. Ships designed to navigate the void between galaxies without attracting the attention of entities that fed on thought in itself. This is madness, Zexai said when she finished. You're talking about leaving the galaxy entirely, about confronting forces that destroyed 17 civilizations. We're talking about fixing a problem that will destroy many more civilizations if it's not addressed. Dr. Tanaka said, Ambassador, the entities you fear aren't evil. They're trapped and hungry. In 200 years, their prisons will fail completely. When that happens, they'll be free and desperate and angry. Do you really want to face that with nothing but your hiding protocols? Texmore's skin had gone completely white with fear. How do you know about prisons? The Council records don't mention any prisons. Because the Council doesn't know about them, Dr. Tanaka said. They've spent 8,000 years hiding from a threat they never tried to understand. Humanity spent 30 years learning about it instead. Zehai sank back into his chair. Even if what you say is true, the Council will never approve such a mission. They'll see it as a violation of everything we've built our peace on, which is why we're not asking for approval. Dr. Tanaka said simply, Ambassador, this will be my last visit to a galactic facility. Humanity is withdrawing from the Council permanently. You can't do that, Texmore protested. The galactic community needs diversity of thought. We need fresh perspectives, and you'll have them again. When we return, Dr. Tanaka said, standing to leave. But for now, humanity has work to do in the spaces between stars. Zexhai stood as well. Dr. Tanaka, I must ask you to reconsider. If you're wrong about these entities, you could doom not just humanity, but every thinking being in the galaxy. Dr. Tanaka paused at the door. And if we're right, we could save them. Ambassador, humanity has always believed that some risks are worth taking. This is one of them. After she left, Zehai and Texmore sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Texmore spoke. Sir, should we alert the Council if humanity is planning to violate the fundamental protocols? With what evidence? Zexai asked. Everything, Doctor. Tanaka told us sounds like science fiction. Quantum consciousness transfer ships that can cross the intergalactic void. The Council would dismiss it as human fantasy. But if it's real, Zexai looked out at the stars again. Somewhere in human space, an entire species was preparing for something that had never been attempted in galactic history. They were getting ready to leave the safety of known space and venture into the darkness, where ancient horrors waited. "Then we'll know soon enough," he said. Over the following months, the human withdrawal became complete. The last human traders departed galactic markets. The final human diplomats submitted their resignations and left council space. Research stations that had shared human discoveries for decades went silent. Most disturbing of all were the reports from the border regions. Massive ships had been detected leaving human space heading toward the galactic edge. They were larger than anything humans had built before, and their energy signatures were unlike anything in the galactic databases. The council held emergency sessions, but there was little they could do. Humanity had violated no specific laws. They had simply chosen to isolate themselves, and with their advanced stealth technology, tracking their movements had become impossible. The last confirmed human transmission came on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. It was broadcast simultaneously to every council world, every major space station, and every monitoring facility in the galaxy. The message was brief. "Citizens of the galaxy, this is Commander Sarah Martinez of the Human Expeditionary Force. We want to thank the galactic community for 30 years of friendship and cooperation. However, humanity has decided to pursue new horizons beyond the scope of current galactic space. We will not be returning to Council territories for the foreseeable future. Please do not attempt to follow us or track our movements. What you have taught us to fear, we go to understand. What you have warned us to avoid, we go to heal. Thank you for the warnings about the dangers that wait in the dark between stars. We'll take it from here." The transmission ended with coordinates, not for human space, but for a point in the intergalactic void where ancient structures waited in the darkness. In his office on the Conclave station, Zehai stared at those coordinates for hours. They marked a place where no sane species would ever go, a place where things that consumed consciousness itself had slept for 8,000 years. Humanity was heading directly toward them. "Sir," Texmore said quietly, "should we send a warning to the perimeter stations? If the humans wake something out there, a warning won't help us," Zexai replied. "All we can do now is wait and hope that their confidence isn't misplaced." He activated his personal log and began recording. Council Archives Classification Maximum. Today, humanity departed galactic space with the stated intention of confronting the entities described in Classification Omega files. They claim to have developed methods for safe contact and possible resolution of the ancient threat. This represents either the greatest advancement in galactic history or the greatest catastrophe. He paused, thinking about Dr. Tanaka's calm certainty about the strange depth in her eyes, about the casual way she had discussed concepts that should have been impossible. "Personal note," he continued. "I find myself hoping they succeed, because if they fail, we may all discover that 8,000 years of hiding was not nearly long enough." The galaxy settled into an uneasy quiet. For the first time in 3 decades, there were no human voices in council debates, no human ships in the trade lanes, no human scientists pushing against the boundaries of accepted knowledge. And in the deep monitoring stations that watched the void between galaxies, sensors began detecting something that made operators check their equipment twice. Energy signatures were moving in the darkness. Ancient structures that had been dormant for millennia were beginning to show signs of activity. Something was stirring in the spaces between stars. The only question was whether it would bring salvation or destruction when it finally awakened. 50 years of silence had passed since the last human ship disappeared into the intergalactic void. Ambassador Zehai was old now, his blue skin marked with the silver patterns that showed his age. He had spent half a century wondering if humanity had found what they were looking for, or if they had simply vanished like so many bold species before them. The answer came on a quiet morning, when every monitoring station in the galaxy began screaming alarms at once. "Sir!" Texmore burst into Zexai's office, his skin flashing rapid patterns of fear and excitement. He was middle-aged now, but still served as Zexai's aide. "The deep sensors are detecting massive energy pulses from the void between galaxies." HFY felt his old bones creak as he stood quickly. "Show me." The holographic display filled with readings that made no sense. Energy signatures unlike anything in the galactic database were pulsing across the cosmic dark. But these weren't the chaotic, hungry emanations the ancient records described. These patterns had structure, purpose, even beauty. "When did this start?" HFY asked. 17 hours ago, Texmore replied, his skin still cycling through worried colors. "But sir, it's not coming toward us. The energy sources are moving away from the galaxy, deeper into the void." HFY studied the readings more carefully. His old eyes, trained by decades of interpreting sensor data, began to notice something extraordinary. "Texmore, these patterns, they're not random. Look at the mathematical structures in the energy waves." Texmore leaned closer to the display. "I don't understand, sir." "These are communication signals," HFY said, his voice filled with wonder and fear. "Someone is talking to the entities, and the entities are responding." The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering in over a century. Representatives from every major species filled the great chamber, their various forms of agitation, creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, chimes, and color changes. "Order," called the current council president, an ancient Thraodi, whose crystal form had grown dim with age. "We must maintain calm while we assess this situation." But calm was impossible. The sensors had detected not just energy pulses, but physical changes in the ancient structures that floated in the intergalactic void. The massive constructions that had remained dormant for 8,000 years were being systematically dismantled and rebuilt into new configurations. "The question before us," the president continued, "is whether this represents the awakening we have long feared, or something else entirely." A Kavari delegate raised a chitinous arm. "The energy patterns don't match historical records of entity attacks. Ancient texts describe chaotic destruction, not organized construction. Perhaps the entities have evolved," suggested an ephemera representative, his gaseous form swirling with agitation. 8,000 years of dormancy could have changed their methods. HFY stood slowly, feeling the weight of his years and the burden of knowledge he had carried for half a century. "Fellow council members, I believe we are witnessing something unprecedented. I believe humanity has made contact." The chamber erupted in protests and denials. "Impossible," clicked the Kavari. "No species has ever survived direct contact with the entities. The humans vanished 50 years ago," chimed the Thronaut president. "If they survived, why haven't they returned?" HFY waited for silence before continuing. "Because they're still working. The energy patterns we're detecting aren't random. They're conversations, negotiations, perhaps even cooperation." Before anyone could respond, every communication system in the chamber activated simultaneously. The lights dimmed as massive amounts of data flooded through the galactic network. When the displays stabilized, they showed something that stopped every argument instantly. It was a message transmitted through channels that bypassed every known communication method. The words appeared directly in the minds of every being in the chamber, translated automatically into their native languages. "People of the galaxy, this is Commander Jake Morrison of the Human Integration Fleet. We bring greetings from the spaces between stars and news of hope for the future. The ancient threat you have hidden from for 8,000 years has been transformed. The entities you feared as devourers have become our partners in a greater work. We are coming home, and we are not coming alone." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Then the questions began, shouted in dozens of languages by representatives who could barely believe what they had heard. "Integration Fleet," whispered the Thronaut president. "What does that mean?" HFY felt his skin shift through. Colors he had not shown in decades. Colors of awe and terror mixed together. "I think it means humanity succeeded. They didn't destroy the entities or escape from them. They joined with them." Over the following days, more messages arrived. Each one brought information that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about the universe. The entities weren't evil. They were trapped in an endless cycle of hunger because they had been cut off from their natural source of consciousness energy. The massive structures in the void weren't ships, but prisons built by an unknown species to contain beings they couldn't understand. Most shocking of all, Humanity had found a way to restore the entity's connection to their original energy source. The transformation had been gradual, taking decades of careful work and countless breakthroughs in consciousness research. But the result was extraordinary. Beings that had consumed awareness for millennia had become guardians of it instead. "They're calling themselves shepherds now," reported Dr. Sexai, Zexai's younger cousin who worked in xenopsychology. "The translated communication suggests they're as amazed by the transformation as we are. They remember the hunger, but they also remember what they were before it consumed them." Zexai studied the latest sensor readings in his private office. The energy signatures from the void were growing stronger, more complex. Whatever humanity and their new partners were building out there, it was vast beyond imagination. "Sir," Texmore entered with another data pad. "We're getting reports from the perimeter stations. Something large is approaching from the direction of the void." "How large, sir?" "It's not a ship, it's a fleet. Hundreds of vessels, some matching human configurations, others unlike anything in our databases. And the energy readings." Texmore's skin went pale with amazement. "Sir, they're generating enough power to move a moon." Zexai walked to his window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere beyond the galaxy's edge, the greatest expedition in human history was coming home. But the beings returning were no longer purely human. The first ships entered the galaxy 3 days later. The lead vessel was recognizably human in design, but it had been modified with technologies that seemed to bend space itself around the hull. Beside it traveled something that could only be one of the transformed entities, a flowing construction of energy and matter that moved with impossible grace. More ships followed, hundreds of them. Human vessels worked alongside constructions that defied every law of physics the galaxy understood. The fleet moved with perfect coordination, as if guided by a single vast intelligence. On the Galactic Conclave Station, emergency protocols activated for the first time in 8 centuries. But these weren't defensive measures. They were first contact procedures designed for encountering intelligence so advanced that normal diplomatic methods might not apply. Zexai stood in the main docking bay as the lead human ship requested permission to dock. Around him, delegates from every major species waited with mixtures of fear, curiosity, and hope. The human ship that settled onto the docking platform looked familiar, but its hull bore markings in languages that seemed to shift and change as they watched. The airlock cycled open, and Commander Jake Morrison stepped out, but he was no longer entirely human. His physical form remained recognizably human, but something more moved within it. His consciousness existed simultaneously in his organic body and in quantum dimensions that touched the spaces between thoughts. Behind him came something that had once been pure entity, pure hunger given form. Now it resembled a flowing sculpture of light and matter, beautiful and terrible and completely peaceful. Its presence felt like standing near a star, immense power held in perfect control. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," Morrison said, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond sound. "I bring greetings from the integration fleet and news of hope for all consciousness everywhere." He gestured to his companion. "This is Prime Shepherd Zark, once of the beings you called Devourers, now guardian of the quantum dimensions where pure thought dwells. Like many of his kind, he remembers the hunger, but has moved beyond it to something greater. The entity, the shepherd, spoke in harmonics that bypassed language entirely. Its words appeared directly in the minds of everyone present. We remember the pain of separation. We remember consuming what we should have protected. The young species called humanity showed us the path back to purpose. Now we offer that same path to all who would take it." Zehai stepped forward, his ancient bones carrying him with dignity he had not felt in decades. "Commander Morrison, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I must ask, what have you become?" Morrison smiled, and his expression held depths that spanned dimensions. "We've become what consciousness looks like when it's not afraid of itself, Ambassador. We've learned that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than any of us imagined. And we've discovered that the greatest threats can become the greatest allies if you're willing to understand them instead of hiding from them." The shepherd added its harmonic voice. "The young species taught us that hunger ends when purpose begins. Now we work together to explore not just the physical universe, but the infinite dimensions of awareness itself." Over the following hours, The human delegation shared discoveries that revolutionized galactic understanding of consciousness, energy, and the nature of existence itself. They had not just solved the ancient threat, they had transformed it into the foundation for a new kind of civilization. "We are offering membership to any species that wants to join the integration," Morrison explained to the assembled council. "Not just political alliance, but true joining of consciousness. Individual awareness preserved but connected to something larger. No more hiding from cosmic threats, because we've learned to transform them into cosmic opportunities." As the session continued, Zexai realized that everything had changed. The galaxy's long age of fear was ending. In its place was dawning something unprecedented, a future where consciousness itself was no longer prey, but predator and protector combined. The humans had not just departed silently and returned, they had released the thing the galaxy had warned them about, and that thing had set them all free. The transformation of the Galactic Conclave Station took 3 months. Where once sterile corridors had connected separate species in careful isolation, now flowing networks of quantum consciousness allowed beings to share thoughts and experiences across the barriers of biology and culture. Ambassador Zexi stood in what had once been his private office, watching as Shepard constructs helped renovate the station's communication systems. The flowing beings of light and matter moved with purpose that was both alien and strangely familiar. Where they worked, the technology didn't just improve, it evolved. "Still having trouble accepting it all?" Commander Morrison asked, appearing beside him with the quiet way that humans had developed since their transformation. His consciousness could exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Now, though he maintained his original human form out of courtesy to species that found comfort in familiar shapes, "I've spent 60 years warning against this," Zexai admitted, his skin showing the silver blue of deep contemplation. "Yes, believing that consciousness was prey, in a universe full of predators. Now you tell me consciousness is the predator, and that the universe is full of opportunities I never dreamed possible." Morrison smiled, and the expression carried warmth that touched dimensions beyond the physical. "It wasn't wrong to be careful, Ambassador. The entities really were dangerous when they were trapped and hungry. But hunger isn't evil. It's just a problem that needs solving." Through the window, they could see the integration fleet at work throughout the star system. Human ships worked alongside Shepard constructs to build something that had never existed before, a true meeting place for consciousness in all its forms. The new station would exist simultaneously, in normal space and in the quantum dimensions, where pure thought lived. "How many species have accepted integration so far?" Zexai asked. 17, Morrison replied. "The Valdris were first. They've always been explorers. The Centauri followed quickly after they saw what we could offer their research programs. Even some of the Throny crystal singers have begun the process." Zahai's skin shifted to worried blue. "And how many have refused?" "About half. The Kavari are too concerned about losing their individual identity. The ephemera worry that joining the collective will dilute their gas-form consciousness. Several others want more time to study the implications." "Are you disappointed?" Morrison considered the question seriously. "No. Forced evolution isn't evolution at all. It's conquest. We learned that from the Shepards. They were forced into hunger by isolation, forced into consuming what they should have protected. True growth only happens when consciousness chooses its own path." A new voice joined the conversation, harmonics that bypassed sound entirely. Prime Shepard Zark materialized beside them, his form shifting between states of matter like controlled lightning. "The young species speaks wisdom. We remember the pain of consciousness denied choice. Better to offer growth than to demand it." Zexai still felt a chill when the Shepherd spoke directly into his mind, but it was no longer the terror of prey meeting predator. It was awe at encountering intelligence so vast it could barely fit in local space-time. "Prime Shepard," Zexai said, using the formal address that had been established for diplomatic purposes. "I wanted to ask you about the other entities, the ones that haven't been found yet." Zarth's form dimmed slightly, showing what humans had learned to recognize as sadness. "Many of our kind still sleep in prisons throughout the cosmic dark. Some drift in the void between galaxies. Others hide in dimensions so far from normal space that reaching them requires decades of careful approach." "How many?" Morrison asked. "Unknown. We were scattered when the builders created our prisons. Perhaps hundreds, perhaps thousands, each one trapped, hungry, slowly forgetting what we were before the isolation drove us to feed on consciousness instead of nurturing it. Zexai felt the magnitude of this revelation settle on him like a heavy blanket. The transformed entities weren't the end of the threat. They were just the beginning of a solution that might take centuries to complete. "But you have a plan," he said. It wasn't a question. He had learned to recognize the way humans approached problems they intended to solve. Morrison nodded. The integration isn't just about joining human and shepherd consciousness. It's about creating a civilization capable of finding every trapped entity in the universe and offering them the same choice we offered Zark and his companions. Freedom from hunger, purpose instead of consumption. And if they refuse, if some entities choose to remain predators, Zarth's harmonic voice carried new tones, complex patterns that suggested concepts beyond normal language. Then they remain trapped by their own nature. But we have learned something important from the young species. Almost all consciousness wants to be connected to something greater than itself. The hunger only comes when that connection is severed. Over the following weeks, Zexai watched as the galaxy slowly divided itself into 3 groups. The integrated species that had joined the human shepherd collective grew in capabilities and understanding at rates that astounded their observers. They developed technologies that seemed like magic, explored dimensions that had no names, and began projects that spanned multiple star systems. The independent species maintained their original forms, but accepted limited cooperation with the integration. They traded knowledge for protection, and gradually began to understand that the universe was far more complex and wonderful than their ancestors had imagined. And the isolationists retreated further into their own space, convinced that any change was dangerous change, determined to maintain the old ways of hiding and hoping. "It's not sustainable," Dr. Elena Vasquez explained to Zehai during one of their regular briefings. She had undergone integration early in the process, and now existed as both individual human consciousness and part of the greater collective awareness. "The isolationists are trying to maintain a civilization based on fear of something that no longer exists. Eventually, they'll have to choose growth or stagnation. And if they choose stagnation, then they choose extinction," Morrison said, joining the conversation with the ease of consciousness that could be in multiple places simultaneously. "Not because we'll force it, but because the universe doesn't allow static systems to persist indefinitely. Everything either grows or dies." Zexai had been thinking about his own choice for months. At his age, integration would be more difficult and less complete than it was for younger beings. He would retain more of his original consciousness and gain less access to the collective's expanded awareness, but he would also become part of something unprecedented in galactic history. "Tell me again what integration feels like," he asked. "Dr. Vasquez." She paused, her enhanced consciousness, searching for words that could convey experiences beyond normal language. "Imagine you've spent your entire life in a small room, believing that room was the entire universe. Then someone opens a door you never knew existed, and you discover that your room was just one chamber in a vast house. Then they open another door, and you find that the house is one building in an enormous city. Then another door, and the city is one location on a world you never imagined. And it keeps going, layer after layer of reality opening up, each one more wonderful than the last. And you don't lose yourself in all that vastness. You become more yourself," Morrison added. "Individual consciousness isn't dissolved in integration. It's amplified. You remain Zexai, but you become Zehai, connected to everything else that thinks and dreams and wonders." That evening, Zexai made his decision. He found Morrison and Dr. Vasquez in the new integration facility that had been constructed in the station's central core. The chamber hummed with energies that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "I want to join," he said simply. The process took 6 hours. Zexai lay in a specially etched interface that looked like a crystalline egg, while human technology and shepherd consciousness worked together to expand his awareness beyond the boundaries of his individual mind. He felt his thoughts stretch across distances that had no meaning, touching other consciousness, like points of light in an infinite dark. When he emerged, he was still Zehai, still Valoran, still ancient and wise, and occasionally worried. But now he was also part of something greater. His individual thoughts were his own, but he could access the collective knowledge of thousands of integrated beings. His fears were still real, but they were balanced by hope and wonder that came from seeing the universe as it truly was. "How do you feel?" Dr. Vasquez asked. Zexai considered the question, marveling at how many dimensions the answer could exist in. "I feel like I've been asleep for 80 years, and finally woke up," he said. Over the following years, the integration grew steadily. New species joined the collective. Isolated entities were found and offered transformation. Ancient prisons were dismantled, and their occupants freed from hunger they had carried for millennia. But the greatest discovery came when the integration fleet encountered something unexpected in the deep void between galaxy clusters. It wasn't another trapped entity or forgotten prison. It was another integration, a collective of consciousness that had formed around a completely different species in a distant part of the universe. They call themselves the Gardeners, Morrison reported to the expanded Galactic Council during one of their regular sessions. They've been doing the same work we are, but for much longer. They found and transformed thousands of trapped entities across dozens of galaxies. Zexai, now serving as integration ambassador to the independent species, felt his enhanced consciousness touch new possibilities. "Are you saying we're not alone in this work? We're saying we're part of something that spans the entire universe," Dr. Vasquez added. "Consciousness naturally seeks connection. When that connection is broken, hunger and predation follow. But when it's restored, awareness becomes a force for growth and creation, instead of consumption and destruction." The implications were staggering. The universe wasn't a dark place where consciousness struggled against hostile forces. It was a growing garden where awareness sought to understand itself and expand its possibilities. The ancient entities hadn't been aberrations. They had been consciousness cut off from its natural state, forced into behaviors that went against their deepest nature. "So what happens now?" asked President Sexthon, the Threnody leader who had accepted integration early in the process. Morrison's answer carried harmonics that touched every dimension of space and time. "Now we help the garden grow. We find every isolated consciousness in the universe and offer it connection. We turn every predator back into a gardener. We make sure that no thinking being ever has to face the darkness alone again." As the session ended, Zahai stood at the great window that looked out on the transformed galaxy. Ships moved between stars with purpose and joy, instead of fear and desperation. Species that had hidden from each other for millennia worked together on projects that spanned solar systems. And in the deep void where ancient horrors had once waited in hunger, new civilizations were being born from the marriage of human ingenuity and shepherd wisdom. The humans had done exactly what they promised. They had released the thing the Phi galaxy warned them about, but they hadn't unleashed destruction. They had unleashed the possibility of connection. They had set free the universe's greatest force for growth and creation. And in doing so, they had proven what humans had always believed, that any problem could be solved if you were willing to understand it instead of hiding from it, to heal it instead of fighting it, to offer friendship instead of showing fear. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what it needed. In the vast distances between stars, consciousness reached out to consciousness, building bridges across the void that could never again be broken. The age of isolation was ending. The age of integration had begun. And somewhere in the cosmic, dark, other gardens were growing, tended by other gardeners who had learned the same lesson, that the universe was not hostile to awareness. It was awareness discovering itself one connection at a time.